Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to be talking about rotations. Remember, rotation is a transformation that turns a figure around a given point and a given angle. Why don't you take time to write down this definition, and then we'll go into details a little bit more. So once again, a transformation, rotations are transformations that turn a figure around a given point and a given angle. And so remember, we talked about rotations has two T's in it, and then with turns, which is the movement that is happening, we have that T for turns. All right, what I did with my clear square is I just kind of traced around it so you guys can see the outline of the square. We all know that squares have 4 right angles, so I'm just going to demonstrate moving my dot 90 degrees 4 times. So if I move it 90 degrees, I'm turning it, and so here, when I'm back and having my square look like a square, I have turned it 90 degrees, okay? And then another 90 degrees, and another 90 degrees, and then eventually another 90 degrees back to where I started. Alright, so when I turn it 90 degrees and I go in this direction, I'm actually going clockwise. So I've turned it 90 degrees clockwise. Okay, if I have to do another 90 degrees, 90 plus 90 is 180 degrees. So I went 180 degrees clockwise. And then another 90 degrees, 180 plus 90 is going to give me 270 degrees clockwise. And then if I go back to where I started, it makes sense because I went all the way around, and so that's going to be 360 degrees clockwise. Okay? Now, if I would decide to go the other direction takes me counterclockwise. So if I go 90 degrees counterclockwise, notice that is the same as going 270 degrees clockwise. So 90 degrees counterclockwise is the same as 270 degrees clockwise. If I go another 90 degrees counterclockwise, well, that's exactly the same as 180 degrees clockwise. If I go another 90 degrees counterclockwise, that's going to be 270 degrees, and that's going to be the same as going 90 degrees clockwise. And then I go one more, 360 degrees counterclockwise is the same as doing 360 degrees clockwise. Okay? All right. What we're going to do is just look at how that point is changing as I go from angle to angle. And so go down to this part right here, and we're going to look at what is our X and Y coordinate ordered pair for our original. So if you go up here, it's going to be I go over 2 and up 5. So my original point is going to be 2, 5. Now, if I move that point 90 degrees clockwise, which is the same as 270 degrees, what happens to my point? Okay, I am now at 5, -2. So my new point, when I go 90 degrees clockwise or 270 degrees counterclockwise, I have 5, -2. What do you notice about our X and Y? Our X and Y have switched spots. Okay, the Y is now where the x used to be, and the x is now where y used to be. But there's also something I need to note. This becomes negative, and so here I need to make x the opposite. Okay, so once again this is my original starting point. I went 90 degrees clockwise, which is the same as saying 270 degrees counterclockwise, and I ended up at 5, -2, which is the rule. You switch your x and y, and you take the opposite of x. Okay, now I'm going to rotate my point. Go back to the original. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees, so this is 90. One more 90 degree is going to give me 180. Where's my point now? My point now is at -2, -5. So my point is at -2, -5. And so what happened to my original x and y? Well, if I look at it, I started at 2, 5. I still have a 2 and a 5, so my x and y didn't change positions, but if you notice, they're now the opposite of what they were before. So the rule is I just take the opposite of my x and y. All right, let's do 270 degrees clockwise, which is the same as 90 degrees counterclockwise. And so if I do that, if I start at my original point, I can go 270 degrees, so this is 90, this is 180, and then this is 270. Where do I end up? I end up at -5, +2. So I'm at -5, +2. Okay? And so what happened to my x and y? Once again, I started at 2, 5, but now I have a -5, 2. So I know, again, my x and y's switch places. But this time, I'm taking the opposite of my y. Okay? All right, let's look at if I go 360 degrees, what happens? I end up back where I started. And so I'm back at 2, 5. And so if I go back down here, my point is at 2, 5. So when I go to 360 degrees clockwise or 360 degrees counterclockwise, my x and y don't change. All right, now we're going to do just some practice so we can apply those rules that we just talked about. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to rotate, so write this down, we're going to rotate triangle JKL 90 degrees counterclockwise. I'm going to go 90 degrees counterclockwise. So the first thing I need to do, I'm going to look on my second page and I'm going to see what the rule is. Well, I'm going to take my original x and y. I am going to then switch them and then take the opposite of y. Okay? So what I need to do first is find the ordered pair for J, K, and L. So J, K, L. If I look at it, J is at 1, 3. K is at 3, -2. And L is at 1, -2. Then I'm going to apply the rule so I can get my primes. J prime is going to be, I'm going to switch them, so I'm going to have 3, 1, but my 3 is going to be negative because that y is going to become negative. K is going to be, I'm going to switch them, so it'll be -2, 3, but I'm taking the opposite of the y, so it's going to be a +2. That's K prime. And then L prime, I'm going to, once again, switch my x and y. I'm going to have -2, 1, but I have an opposite of y, so opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. Once I have my primes, I am then going to plot my points. And so here I have a negative 3, 1, 2, 3, positive 1. Then I have a positive 2, positive 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh, got a label, so I have J prime, K prime, and then L prime is at 2, 1, L prime. And so I connect, draw, and now I have rotated my figure 90 degrees counterclockwise. I know I've done everything correctly because JKL and JKL prime are the same size and the same shape, and so that I know that they are congruent. When I'm doing rotations, I know that my image and my pre-image have to be the same size, the same shape, therefore congruent. And so JKL and J prime, K prime, L prime are congruent. Okay, now I want you to try one on your own. You're going to take triangle ABC, and what I want you to do is I want you to rotate triangle ABC 180 degrees clockwise. Okay, so rotate it 180 degrees clockwise around the origin. Our guest teacher is going to pause while you guys work. Once you get done, then she's going to unpause it and you're going to check your work with what I have. Okay, so you have all worked and hopefully you checked with each other, but this is what you should have. These are the original points. A is negative 5, negative 6, B is negative 3, negative 2, C is negative 1, negative 6. And so the rule is when you're rotating 100 degrees clockwise, you're just taking the opposite of X and the opposite of Y. So if you did that, these are your new points. And if you graphed it correctly, this is what you should have. And then looking at it, I did kind of do a little turn about the origin 180 degrees. They're the same size, same shape, so I know those two triangles are congruent. Okay, now what I want you to do is, can you figure out the rule? Okay, what type of rotation took triangle QRS to triangle Q prime, R prime, and S prime? So work together as a table. I'm going to have our guest teacher pause again so that you can work. Please write down the original points and then the prime points, compare them to see what the rule was. All right, we're going to pause so that you guys can work. Okay, you're back, so that means that you guys have all worked together and you figure out the rule that took QRS to Q prime, R prime, S prime. As you can see, I have the original coordinates here, so double check that you have the same. And then I looked at the prime, the coordinates of the prime, and then double check to make sure that you have the same. So if you compare them, the X and Y are still in the same position, but I go from a negative 5 to a positive 5, a positive 2 to a negative 2. So that means that I've taken the opposite of my X and Y. And so what rule is that? That is rotated 180 degrees clockwise. But you can also put 180 degrees counterclockwise because it's the same thing. All right, we'll do more practice with this. Your guest teacher has some more instructions for you. See you tomorrow.